4 weeks before my wedding, my fiancé told me he had invited his ex-girlfriend to our ceremony. When I asked why he had not mentioned it earlier, Ethan looked me straight in the eye and said that if I truly loved him, I would understand that mature adults can remain friends with their exes. He said it with such confidence that, for a moment, I wondered if I was the problem. Then I noticed the way his hand moved to his phone. When I asked about her husband, that small gesture changed everything, and what I did next saved me from the biggest mistake of my life. My name is Rachel Miller. I'm 34 years old, and I teach 5th grade at a public school in the Midwest. 4 weeks before my wedding, I thought I knew the man I was about to marry. I thought I understood what love looked like. I was wrong about both. If you want to hear more true stories about boundaries, self-respect, and the courage it takes to choose yourself when everything is telling you to stay silent, please subscribe. These are the moments that define us, and I share mine, so you know you are not alone. I was pinning the hem of my wedding dress when Ethan walked into the bedroom. The seamstress had left me with instructions to mark where I wanted the final adjustments, and I was being careful with each fold. I wanted everything to be perfect. The lace was delicate, imported, and I had saved for 8 months to afford it. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed and watched me for a moment. Then he said something that made my hands go still. He said, "I invited Vanessa to the wedding. I hope that is okay." I looked up from the fabric. I said, "Vanessa? Your ex from college?" He said, "Yes, we have stayed friends over the years. I thought it would be nice to have her there. She is happy for us." I placed the pin I was holding onto the dresser. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the air had thickened. I said, "You did not mention this before." He said, "I did not think it would be a big deal. You have always been so understanding." The way he said understanding made me pause. It was the tone people use when they want you to prove something, when they are testing whether you will object. I had learned in my classroom that when a student uses that exact voice, they are hoping you will not ask the next question. So I asked it. I said, "Is her husband coming with her?" Ethan shifted his weight on the bed. He said, "David cannot make it. He has a work commitment that weekend. Something with a conference in another state." The answer came too quickly, too smooth. I teach 10-year-olds, and I know what a rehearsed explanation sounds like. I said, "What kind of conference?" He said, "Engineering, some technical thing." I did not get all the details. I nodded slowly and went back to pinning my dress. My hands were steady even though my pulse was not. I had a choice in that moment. I could push and argue and go in circles, or I could observe and gather facts. I chose the latter. It is a boundary I set for myself years ago, after watching my mother exhaust herself trying to argue men into honesty. Instead, I let silence do the work. But I did ask one more question, softly, as though it barely mattered. I said, "When did you send the invitation to Vanessa?" Ethan hesitated. It was only a second, but I caught it. He said, "A couple of weeks ago, maybe 3. Our save the dates had gone out 5 months earlier. Our formal invitations had been mailed 6 weeks ago with a clear RSVP deadline. If he had added Vanessa recently, it meant he had reached out separately. It meant this was not part of the original plan." I finished pinning the last section of lace and stood up. I said, "I am glad she can make it." Ethan relaxed. He smiled and kissed my forehead. He said, "I knew you would understand. This is why I love you." After he left the room, I sat on the bed with my laptop. I did not know David well, but I knew he existed. Vanessa had tagged him in a few old photos years ago, back when Ethan and I first started dating, and I had done the awkward scroll through his past. David worked as an engineer at a firm 2 hours north of us. I found his profile in under 5 minutes. He was not listed as attending any conference that weekend. In fact, his company website showed their annual conference had happened in March. I saved his contact information. I did not know what I would do with it yet, but I knew I needed to verify the story. That night, while Ethan slept beside me, I lay awake and made a decision. I would not fight in circles. I would find the truth quietly, and then I would act. What I discovered in the next 48 hours would unravel everything. I sent David a message the next morning from my real account. I did not hide behind anonymity or fake profiles. I used my teacher voice, the one that is clear and respectful, and does not apologize for asking reasonable questions. I wrote that my name was Rachel, that I was engaged to Ethan, and that I had a concern. I hoped he could help me understand. I asked if he had a few minutes to talk, and I left my number. He responded 3 hours later. He said, "I can call you at 7 p.m. tonight if that works." At exactly 7, my phone rang. David's voice was careful, measured. He said, "I am not sure what this is about, but I am listening." I said, "Ethan told me he invited Vanessa to our wedding. He said you could not attend because of a work conference. I checked your company website. There is no conference that weekend. There was a pause. Then David said, "No, there is not." I said, "So you were not planning to skip the wedding for work?" He said, "I was not planning to attend the wedding at all. Vanessa told me she was going alone because you and Ethan wanted an intimate ceremony, and plus ones were limited. She said it was just a day trip." I felt something cold settle in my chest. I said, "She is listed as staying at the Manor venue overnight. The room block is under her name." David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I did not know that." We talked for another 20 minutes. We were both careful not to share private details or violate anyone's trust in ways that felt unethical. We did not read each other texts or emails. We did not speculate wildly. We simply compared facts, small, verifiable pieces of information that did not line up. David told me that Vanessa had been staying late at the office more frequently over the past 2 months. She had mentioned Ethan's name twice in passing, once saying they had reconnected on social media and once saying she was glad he had found happiness. I told David that Ethan had been vague about his Thursday evening plans for the past month, always saying it was work drinks or client meetings that ran late. When I checked our shared credit card statement the week before, I found charges at a wine bar downtown on 3 separate Thursdays. The wine bar was 2 blocks from Vanessa's office. David said, "I do not want drama, I just want the truth." I said, "So do I." We agreed on a plan. We would both attend the rehearsal dinner. David would come as Vanessa's husband, which he was entitled to do. I would stay calm and observe. If there was an opportunity to ask direct questions in front of both Ethan and Vanessa, we would take it. Our only goal was truth and safety, not revenge or public humiliation. We were 2 people who deserved honesty, and we would stand together to get it. The next day, I tested Ethan one more time. We were reviewing the seating chart for the rehearsal dinner, and I noticed Vanessa's name was placed at a table close to the head table, closer than my own cousin. I said, "Should we move Vanessa further back? She does not know most of the guests in that section." Ethan's jaw tightened. He said, "I think she is fine where she is. She knows my college friends at that table." I said, "I thought you two had not been in close touch over the years." He said, "We have not, but she will be comfortable there." That night, I found a text notification on Ethan's phone. While he was in the shower, the screen lit up on the nightstand, and I saw Vanessa's name. The preview said, "Looking forward to finally having time to talk without interruptions." The message had been sent at 9:43 that evening. I did not open his phone. I did not need to. The timestamp and the phrase "without interruptions" told me enough. They had been talking regularly, and those conversations had been interrupted before, by me, by David, by the lives we thought we were building with them. I texted David. I wrote, "Are you still willing to come to the rehearsal dinner?" He responded immediately. He said, "Yes, I will be there." I wrote back, "We will arrive together. We will keep our voices steady. The truth will speak for itself." He sent one word. He said, "Agreed." I put my phone down and looked at my wedding dress hanging on the closet door. The lace caught the light from the hallway, delicate and expensive and perfect. In 3 days, we would sit across from Ethan and Vanessa. At the rehearsal dinner, we would smile and nod and let them think everything was going according to their plan. And then, when the moment was right, we would ask the questions they had been avoiding. I did not know exactly how it would unfold, but I knew this: I was done being understanding. I was done letting smooth explanations cover up lies. What happened next would change everything. Over the next 2 days, David and I exchanged careful messages. We were both professionals, both people who understood that accusations without evidence create chaos instead of clarity. We agreed on simple principles. We would not ambush anyone. We would not create a scene for the sake of drama. We would simply arrive together, present the facts we each knew to be true, and let Ethan and Vanessa respond in front of witnesses who cared about honesty. David told me he had asked Vanessa directly about the wedding plans the night before. He said, "I asked her why she told me plus ones were limited when the invitation clearly included a guest option." I said, "What did she say?" He said, "She changed the subject. She said I was being paranoid and that she did not want to burden me with a long drive for people I did not know." I recognized that deflection. It was the same technique Ethan used when I asked about the wine bar charges. Answer a different question than the one asked. Make the person questioning feel unreasonable. I had seen students try it when they were caught copying homework. The strategy only works if you let it. I said, "We will not let them deflect on Saturday." David said, "Agreed." The rehearsal dinner was set for 6:30 at an upscale restaurant downtown. 24 guests, mostly family and the wedding party. I had chosen the menu 3 months earlier, back when I thought I was planning a celebration of love and commitment. Now the dinner felt like something else entirely. A reckoning. On Thursday, 2 days before the rehearsal, I pressed Ethan one more time. We were going over final details, and I pointed to the seating chart. I said, "Remind me how Vanessa knows the people at table 4? Ethan glanced at the chart. He said, "Those are my college friends. Mark and Jeremy. They all hung out together back then." I said, "I thought you said you and Vanessa had not been in close touch over the years. How would she know them now?" He blinked. His hand moved to his phone again. "That same tell from before." He said, "I mean, they were close in college. People do not forget those connections." I said, "You told me she would be comfortable there because she knows them." Present tense. Ethan's jaw tightened. He said, "Rachel, I do not understand why you are picking apart every detail. This is supposed to be a happy time." I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "You are right. I am sorry." I was not sorry, but I had learned that sometimes you gain more by stepping back than by pushing forward. Ethan relaxed, kissed my cheek, and went back to scrolling on his phone. I watched him for a moment, this man I had planned to marry, and I felt a strange sense of calm. I was not angry. I was not heartbroken yet. I was simply clear. I knew what was coming, and I was ready. That night, I hung my rehearsal dinner dress on the back of the bathroom door. It was navy blue, simple, elegant. I had bought it because Ethan said blue was his favorite color on me. Now I looked at it and realized I did not even like navy that much. I preferred deep green or burgundy, colors that felt richer and more like myself. It was a small thing, but it mattered. How many small things had I adjusted over 2 years to fit what Ethan preferred? How many times had I made myself smaller or quieter or more understanding because he framed my boundaries as obstacles to his happiness? I thought about what weddings are supposed to mean. A joining of lives, yes, but also a declaration of partnership built on truth. You stand in front of everyone you love and you say, "This is the person I choose, and this is the life we are building together." But what happens when the foundation is built on lies? What happens when the person you thought you knew turns out to be someone else entirely? Someone who values appearance over honesty and comfort over respect? The answer was simple. You stop building. You walk away. You choose yourself. And that is exactly what I was about to do. Saturday arrived with clear skies and cool air. I dressed carefully, did my makeup in the mirror, and looked at my own reflection. I said out loud, "You are doing the right thing." At 5:45, I texted David. I wrote, "I will meet you in the parking lot at 6:20. He wrote back, "I will be there." I put my phone in my purse, picked up my keys, and walked out the door. Ethan had left an hour earlier to handle some last-minute details at the restaurant. He had no idea that in less than an hour, the truth he had been hiding would be laid bare in front of his parents. My parents, our siblings, and our closest friends. He had no idea that the woman he thought was understanding and accommodating had stopped being those things the moment he lied to her face. I drove toward the restaurant with my hand steady on the wheel, and I knew that no matter what happened next, I would be okay. The truth was about to speak, and I was ready to listen. David was waiting by his car when I pulled into the parking lot at 6:18. He wore a gray suit and a burgundy tie, and when our eyes met, I saw the same quiet determination I felt in my own chest. We did not need to say much. We walked toward the restaurant entrance together, and I noticed the way his hand shook slightly when he reached for the door. This was not easy for him either, but we were both here because we deserved the truth, and sometimes the only way to get it is to stand together and ask for it out loud. The restaurant host led us toward the private dining room. Through the doorway I could see Ethan standing near the head table, laughing with his brother. My mother was adjusting flowers on table 2. Vanessa stood near the bar, wearing a red dress that looked expensive and deliberate. The moment we walked in, the room shifted. Ethan saw us first. His face went pale, then red. He said, "Rachel? What is going on?" I said, "David is joining us. He is Vanessa's husband." I thought it was strange that he was not invited. Vanessa turned sharply. Her eyes moved from David to me and back again. She said, "What are you doing here?" David's voice was calm, steady. He said, "I am here because my wife is attending a wedding rehearsal dinner, and I was told I could not come due to a work conflict. But I do not have a work conflict." I checked, so I thought I should join after all. The room had gone quiet. My father stood up from his chair. Ethan's mother put down her wine glass. Everyone was watching now. Ethan walked toward us. He said, "Rachel, can we talk privately?" I said, "No, I think we should talk here, in front of everyone." Ethan's jaw clenched. He said, "You are making a scene." I said, "I am asking questions." "David, did Vanessa tell you that +1s were limited for this wedding?" David said, "Yes. She said you wanted an intimate event, and that spouses were not included. I turned to Ethan. I said the invitations had a clear +1 option. Every married couple received an invitation for 2. Why did Vanessa tell David he could not come? Ethan said, I do not know what she told him. That is between them. Vanessa stepped forward. She said, this is ridiculous. I did not want to drag David to an event where he would not know anyone. I was being considerate. David said, you told me you were only staying for the afternoon, but Rachel showed me the room block. You reserved a room at the manor for the night of the wedding. Vanessa's face flushed. She said, plans changed. I said, when did they change? Before or after Ethan started meeting you at the wine bar on Thursday nights? The room went completely still. My mother's hand went to her mouth. Ethan's father leaned forward in his chair. Ethan said, Rachel, you are twisting things. I pulled out my phone. I said, I have the credit card statement. 3 charges at Amelie's wine bar, March 7th, March 14th, March 21st, all on Thursdays between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. You told me those were client meetings. Vanessa said we were just catching up, old friends reconnecting. There is nothing wrong with that. I said, and why lie about it? Why tell me you had not been in close touch? Why tell David he could not come to the wedding? Why book a room at the venue overnight when you said it was just a day trip? David said, and why did you tell me 2 weeks ago that you were glad Ethan found happiness, as if you barely knew what was happening in his life, when clearly you have been involved in planning parts of this wedding? Ethan said, this is insane. You are both being paranoid. My father stood up. He said, Ethan, answer the questions. Ethan looked around the room. His parents, my parents, his brother, my sister, our friends. Everyone was watching him, waiting. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He said, Vanessa and I have stayed in touch. That is all. It is not what you are making it sound like. I said, what am I making it sound like? He did not answer. Vanessa said, you are being cruel, Rachel. You are humiliating us in front of everyone because you are insecure. I looked at her directly. I said, I am not insecure. I am paying attention, and what I see is 2 people who have been lying to their partners for months, who planned to spend my wedding weekend together, and who thought we were too trusting to notice. David said, I noticed. I just did not want to believe it until I had proof. Ethan said, Rachel, please, can we just talk about this privately? I can explain. I said, no, you had weeks to explain. You had dozens of chances to tell me the truth. You chose to lie. You chose to manipulate. You chose to make me feel like I was unreasonable for asking questions. My voice did not shake. My hands did not tremble. I felt clear, calm, certain. I said, the wedding is off. Ethan's face crumpled. He said, you do not mean that. I said, I do. The room erupted in whispers. My mother started crying. Ethan's brother put his hand on Ethan's shoulder. Vanessa grabbed her purse and walked toward the door, but David did not follow her. He stood beside me, quiet and steady, and I realized that in this moment we were the only 2 people in the room who had chosen truth over comfort. The fallout was just beginning, but the hardest part was already over. I had said the words out loud. The wedding was off. My life was still my own. Ethan followed me into the hallway outside the dining room. He said, Rachel, please, let me explain. It is not what it looks like. I turned to face him. I said, and what is it? He said, Vanessa and I were just talking. She was going through a rough time with David, and I was helping her process things. That is all. I said, you lied to me about where you were. You lied about how close you were. You invited her to our wedding without telling me. You gave her a room at the venue and seated her at the head table. If it was innocent, why hide it? He reached for my hand. I stepped back. He said, because I knew you would not understand. I knew you would make it into something it was not. I said, you are right. I do not understand why the man I was going to marry thought lying was easier than honesty. And I do not need to understand. I just need to be done. He said, I love you. I made mistakes, but I love you. I said, love does not lie. Love does not manipulate. Love does not gaslight someone into thinking their boundaries are unreasonable. What you did was not love, Ethan. It was convenience. His face hardened. He said, so is it? You are just going to throw away 2 years because of a misunderstanding? I said, it is not a misunderstanding. It is a pattern, and I am not throwing anything away. I am choosing myself. I walked back into the dining room. My parents were standing by the door, and my mother hugged me tightly. She whispered, I am proud of you. Vanessa was near the bar, her face red with anger. She said, you ruined everything. You could have just let it go? I said, I could have, but I did not want to. David approached me quietly. He said, thank you for reaching out. I would not have known the truth without you. I said, thank you for believing me. I could not have done this alone. He nodded. He said, "I am going to file for divorce." This was not the first time, just the first time I had proof. I said, "I am sorry." He said, "Do not be. We both deserve better." We shook hands, two people who had met as strangers and left as allies. He walked out of the restaurant, and I watched him go. Then I turned to my family and friends, the people who had come to celebrate a wedding that would never happen, and I felt something unexpected. Relief. The dress would go back to the boutique. The venue deposit was lost. The invitations were already mailed. But I was free. I was whole. I had chosen truth over comfort, boundaries over compliance, and myself over a man who thought love meant bending until you broke. 3 weeks later, I stood in my classroom and taught a lesson about integrity. One of my students asked what the word meant, and I said, "It means doing the right thing even when it is hard, even when no one is watching, even when it costs you something." The student said, "Have you ever had to do that?" I smiled. I said yes, and it was the best decision I ever made. I want to ask you something. Have you ever ignored warning signs in a relationship because it was easier than facing the truth? And when you finally did face it, what choice did you make? Leave a comment and share your story. You are not alone.